Nobody likes to pay taxes, but everybody likes public services. And if you're not paying taxes, what kind of roads are you driving down? What kind of health care is your grandfather going to get? And what's the quality of education for our kids? So we got to pay taxes. The question is, what is the most equitable way to raise taxes? And the conversation at the conference focused in on consumption taxes and also to make sure that we remain competitive. So we think that it's time for another review of the taxation structure in Manitoba based on equity, fairness, and the priority of public services against our ability to raise the revenue.
Winnipeg, as a centre for manufacturing, is one of the most cost-effective places to do that type of economic activity, not just in Canada, but in North America. But when you look at some of the other indicators, we are not quite as competitive. So relatively speaking, within Canada, Winnipeg ranks about 12th out of 16 major cities on total effective tax rates. When you look at the other types of tax comparisons, Jack's Mintz has introduced the marginal effective tax rate, which doesn't only look at costs of businesses operating, but also taxes on new investment. Manitoba actually has the second highest marginal effective tax rate of any province in the country. And because we want to be a competitive environment, because we want to grow the pie and prosper that way rather than just simply raise taxes as a way to provide high quality public services, high quality infrastructure, these type of outlier tax rates matter. And so what I proposed is that it's been about 15 years plus now since we've actually had a good comprehensive look at the taxation system in Manitoba, and that's across not just business taxes, frankly, but also the personal income tax, payroll taxes were discussed, and that now is the time to have a look at that in the context of where we want to go with spending decisions. And spending decisions in the context of skills, training, education, healthcare services, and a topic that's been talked about a lot lately, infrastructure.
I really believe that it's complete dysfunction across all three levels of government, and it's extremely complicated and not even close to being efficient between the federal, provincial, and municipal governments. I think we have a very complicated tax system that is a product of largely political decisions, accumulating credits and deductions, and tax practices in order to try to make good political decisions, but not very effectively and certainly not measured. I think we tend to tax growth, and if we were to talk about the payroll tax in Manitoba, it is a straight tax on growth. It is the wrong taxation to raise that kind of money from an economic development perspective, from a community perspective. We tend to tax growth and incent staying small. We have duplication, disincentive, we have some perversion, and it is unaccountable and not very transparent. So I think we have a lot of work to do when it comes to that, and I would much rather see a tax system, and we talked about it, that's much more broadly applied. I'm a big champion of value-added tax. We talked about not calling it HST, but OST, one sales tax. Broadly applied at a lower rate, and I believe moving towards more reliance upon value-added tax and addressing the potential inequity of that through value-added tax rebate and putting less reliance upon personal income tax and income tax is likely the way we need to go. We talked about increasing the basic personal exemption, which is very low actually in Manitoba, certainly much lower than Saskatchewan and Alberta, which takes more and more people and lower income people off the tax rolls completely and creates incentive for them to actually join the workforce.
And when Canadians think of equalization, they think of Quebec and the 4 Atlantic provinces. And I bet you most Canadians don't realize that Manitoba has been a recipient for a long time, and 13% of the budget comes from equalization payments. That's point one. Point two is you've got a $500 million deficit off of $11.5 billion revenues. And you've got a rising debt level. Now, what does all that say about the fiscal underpinnings of the province when you're so dependent on equalization when you're running a substantial deficit and when your debt's going up? What is going to have to give?
First of all, and I know this is a little bit of a cop-out, but Manitoba is not alone in right now struggling with the ongoing lack of strong economic growth. So,
Which is likely to continue for some time.
Which is likely to continue for some time. So A, we're not alone in that. I think B, as it was pointed out this morning, Manitoba's net debt to GDP level is about 25%. Premier Charest said Quebec's is about 55%. So I'll say, relatively speaking, on a debt management issue, we're not in the worst place right now. But there are definite, I would say, fiscal challenges. And part of that is, and it's been identified, is managing spending growth. And so other factors go into play: quality of labor supply, quality of life, infrastructure, and other parts play into the overall decision making, which relate to expenditure decisions.
So what's the cost of an uncompetitive tax system in Manitoba? Well, if you're going to save thousands of dollars a year as a family by moving to Alberta or Saskatchewan, a lot of people will move. If the level of public services is equivalent from one place to another, but the tax you pay is a lot less, people are going to make decisions to leave. If you want to attract private investment to Manitoba, you have to have a tax structure that's competitive with other places. And when I say other places, it's not only Canada, it's the United States and the world. That's what it means to be competitive.